Good morning, class. Once again, welcome to our business mathematics subject. So, we are now in module 3, which is all about ratio and proportion. So, for our learning objectives, we have at the end of this lesson, learners will be able to identify the kinds of proportion and write examples for each. Specifically, you are expected to define ratio and proportion and apply it in real-life situations and identify the kinds of proportion and write examples for each. Okay? So, to begin with, let us refresh your mind on the concept of ratio, which is very essential in your learning on different kinds of proportion. So, I have here an example problem. Mila, Brenda, and Pauline decided to invest 100,000 in a burger shop business along Philam Avenue, Fatima General, Santos City. So the table shows the specific amount of their investment. So you can see here that Mila invested 50,000, Brenda 20,000, and Pauline 30,000. So I have here some questions. So before we answer those questions, let us total this investment. So we have 50 plus 20 plus 30. So the total investment is 100,000. Okay? So let's proceed to the number 1 questions. It says here that what is the ratio of Mila's investment to the whole investment? So Mila's investment is 50,000 and the whole investment is 100,000. So the ratio of Mila's investment to the whole investment is 50,000 to 100,000, and simplify it, so we have 1:2 because we divide both by 50,000, so we have 1:2. Okay? So in number 2 questions naman po, what is the ratio of Brenda's investment? So we have Brenda 20,000 to the whole investment, which is 100,000. So we write this as 20:100 or 1:5 because we divide both by 20,000. 20 divided by 20, we have 1, and 100 divided by 20, we have 5. Okay? And for the last number, what is the ratio of Pauline's investment? 30,000 to Mila's investment, which is 50,000. So we write this as 30:50,000 or 3:5 because we divide both by 10,000 to simplify. Okay? So we have 30 divided by 10, we got 3, and 50 divided by 10, we have 5. Okay? So those are the ratio. Now, let's define what is ratio. Okay? So when we say ratio, it is the comparison of two numbers or measurement. So ratio is the numbers or measurements being compared. So it can express as 1:2 or read as 1:2 or 1/2 or 1 divided by 2. Okay? So there are two ways of finding the ratio. The first one is division and the second one is comparing the numerators of fractions with the same denominator. Okay? So let's have an example. So here, express the following in terms of ratio. So we have letter A. A certain store serves 3 flavors of ice cream. So 4 parts of strawberry, 6 parts of mango, and 11 parts of chocolate. So the ratio of the flavors of ice cream is 4:6:11. Okay? Ayan po. So for the second one, a small merchandise has 12 female and 20 male employees. So what is the ratio of female employees to the 2 male employees? So when writing this, we have 12:20. Okay? So we need to simplify it to lowest term, or para po hindi kayo mahirapan, you can write this as like this. 12/20, and then i-simplify natin into lowest term. So we divide both by 4. So we have 12 divided by 4, we have 3. And 20 divided by 4, we have 5. So the ratio of 12 is to 20 is 3 over 5, or 3 is to 5. Okay? Ayan po. Kailangan po siya i-simplify into lowest term. Okay? Ayan. So let's proceed. Now let's discuss about the rate. So when we say rate, it is a special type of ratio used to compare quantities being compared that cannot be expressed in the same unit. So different unit po na si rate, okay? So for example po, a banana cupcake recipe calls for 2 eggs for every 1.5 cups of flour. Okay? So in number 2, an office secretary can type 120 words per minute. As you can see, they cannot be expressed in the same unit because they're not the same. Okay? So let's proceed. Now we're going to have this activity 1 called Find Me. So the direction here is give what is being asked in the following problem. All answers must be in simplified form. Okay? So if you want to try to answer this, you can pause this video, and then after that, you can proceed on watching na po, okay? So let's have for the number 1, express the sentence into ratio. In selling personalized cakes, the cost of packaging is 60 and the cost of ingredients is 340. So our answer is 3:17. Why? Because ang kanyang original ratio po talaga is 60:340, okay? 60 is to 340. So we simplify it. We divide both by 20. So we get 60 divided by 20, we have 3. And 340 divided by 20, we will get 17. So ang kanyang simplified form is 3:17. Okay? So for number 2, Cheska participates in a baking contest. During the competition, Cheska made sure she put 2 cups of sugar and 4 eggs on every cake. So what would be the ratio of the cups of sugar to the number of eggs if she baked 4 cakes? So our answer here is 1:2. Why? Because she baked 4 cakes. So in every 1 cake, there is 2 cups of eggs. So 2 times 4, we have 8. And then in every 1 cake, there is 4 eggs. So 4 times 4, we have 16. So we simplified it by dividing both by 8. So we have 8 divided by 8, we have 1. And 16 divided by 8, we have 2. Okay? So let's proceed. Number 3, Liza, Catherine, and Nadine are partners. Their capital balances are 20,000, 40,000, and 30,000 respectively. So what is their capital ratio? Okay? So we have, our answer this is 2:4:3. Okay? Pero ang original ratio niya po is 20,000. Ayan. Ang hirap. Is to 40. Is to 30,000. Okay? Now, para po masimplified siya, we divide both by 10,000. So, 20,000 divided by 10, we get 2. 40,000 divided by 40, 40,000 divided by 10, we get 4. And 30,000 divided by 10 is 3. So, the answer is 2:4:3. Okay? So, for number 4, a truck delivered 18 boxes of ripe mangoes and 22 boxes of Indian mangoes. So, what is the ratio of the box of Indian mangoes? So, ratio of the box of Indian mangoes, we have, so 22. And to the box of ripe mangoes is 18. So, 22 is 18. So, we simplify it by dividing both by 2. So, 22 divided by 2, we have 11. And 18 divided by 2 is 9. So, our answer is 11:9. Okay? So for the last number, a basketball team won 15 games and lost 5 games. So what is the ratio of games lost to the games won? So ang question here is the games lost, which is 5. So we have 5 is to games won, which is 15. So 5 is to 15 is the original ratio. We simplified it. We have 1 is to 3. Why? Because we divide both by 5. So 5 divided by 5, we have 1. And 15 divided by 5, we have 3. Okay? So if you get all of them correctly, meaning you'll do understand the ratio and rate. Okay? So now let's proceed to proportion. Okay? So when we say proportion, it is an equation showing two ratios that are equal. So it can be written in two ways. The first one is to as to equal fractions. You can write it as A over B is equals to C over D. And the second one is using a colon wherein A is to B is equals to C is to D, where the means extremes, the product of the means extremes, the means is equal to the product of the extremes. Okay? So let's have an example. In the proportion 15 is to 35 equals x is to 70, what is x? So we're finding for the x. Okay? So we have our equation 15 is to 35 equals x is to 70. So using the formula of the means and the extremes, we simply divide both the means. So 35 times x, we have 35x equals to the product of the extremes. Okay, so 15 times 70, we have 1050. So we need to divide both by 35 to get the value of x. So cancel 35. So we have x is equals to 30. Okay? So ang sabi, diba, the product of the means is equal to the product of the extremes. When you multiply 35 times 30, you will get the same answer, which is 1050. Okay? So let's proceed to another example. 1 dozen of apple costs 240 pesos. How much does 3 dozens cost? So we're finding for the cost, okay? So let x be the cost. So our first equation is 1 is to 40 equals 3 is to x because we're finding for the cost. So now we're going to multiply the extremes. So 1 times x, we get x or 1x, okay? Automatic po yan pag walang ano dyan. It is 1x, okay? So for the second naman po is the product of the means. So 240 times 3 is 720. So the value of x is 720, meaning the 3 dozens of apple cost 720. Okay? Now, let's proceed to the kinds of proportion. The first one is the direct proportion. It says here that the ratios of two quantities being compared is constant. So when one quantity increases or decreases, so does the other quantity. Okay? So, yun po si direct proportion. So, the formula or the way kung paano isulat si direct proportion is x sub 1 is to y sub 1 equals x sub 2 is to y sub 2. Now, let's have the sample equation. 15 computers for 45 students. 45 computers for 135 students. Okay? So, this can be written as 50 is to 45 equals 45 is to 135. Okay? Pwede nyo rin po isulat siya as 50 over 45 equals 45 over 135. Okay? So, as you can see here that the number of computers is directly proportional to the number of students. Since the number of computer increases, the number of students also increases with a constant value of 3. Okay? So, ito po talaga ang example ni direct proportion. So, let's have a sample word problem. If 10 cactus plants cost 2,000 pesos, then how much do 8 cactus plants cost? So the total amount of sales is directly proportional to the number of cactus sold. We see that the greater the number of cactus, the higher is the total cost. So take a look at this ratio. Cactus is to cactus equals cactus is to cost. Sorry. So this can be written as 10 is to 2,000, which is the cost, equals 8 is to x because we're finding for the cost. Okay? So as you can see here, if 10 cactus plants cost 2,000, it is expected that the cost of 8 cactus plants will be lesser than 2,000. In the problem, the number of cactus plants and total cost are directly proportional. Hence, the more cactus you buy, the higher the cost will be, or the lesser cactus you buy, the lower the cost. So that is the direct proportion. Okay? So let's move on to the second kinds of proportion, which is the inverse proportion. Okay? So when we say inverse, the product of two quantities being compared is constant. So when one quantity increases or decreases, so the other quantity decreases or increases. So we have x sub 1 times y sub 1 equals x sub 2 times y sub 2. Okay? So let's have sample equation. 3 persons for 2 days is to 6 persons for 1 day. So this can be written as 3 is to 2 is equal 6 is to 1. So if you use the formula for the inverse, we have 3 times 2 equals 6 times 1. Okay? Ayan. So, the number of persons needed to do the work is inversely proportional to the number of days needed to finish the work. So, since the number of persons needed to do the job increases, the number of working days should be decreased. Okay? So, let's have a sample word problem. In a top spray bottle factory, 2 employees can manufacture 20 bottles of spray in 1 hour. So, how long will it take 5 people to manufacture 20 bottles? So, take a look on this ratio. Employee is to R equals employee is to R also. Okay? So, we write this as 2 is to 1 equals 5 is to x because we're finding for the time. Ayan. Okay, so if two employees can finish 20 bottles in 1 hour, then 5 employees will take less than an hour to manufacture 20 bottles. So we see that more workers on a job would reduce the time to complete the task. Okay, so yun po si indirect proportion or si inverse proportion. Okay, so let's have the last kinds of proportion, which is the partitive proportion. So when we say partitive, in this proportion, the quantity is divided into 2 or more parts based on the given fixed ratio of these parts. So we equate the sum of the parts to the whole quantity. So let's have a sample equation. Child A is to child B is to child C equals 2 is to 3 is to 3. So we have sample word problem. Karen wants to donate her collection of figurines to her 4 friends in the ratio of 1 is to 3 is to 3 is to 5. She has a total of 96 figurines. If her best friend wants the most number of figurines, how many figurines will she get? So, take a look on this ratio. We have friend A is to friend B is to friend C is to friend D equals 1 is to 3 is to 3 is to 5. Okay? So, in this problem, the total number of figurines is partitioned or divided into an equal ratio of 1 is to 3 is to 3 is to 5, thus making use of partitive proportions. Okay? Naka-part by part siya. Okay? So, now, let's have this activity 2 called Tell Me More. So, you need to identify if the given problem illustrates a direct proportion, inverse proportion, or partitive proportion. Okay? Para po ma-assess if you do understand the kinds of proportion. Okay? So, again, you can post this video if you want to try to answer, and then after that, you can play na po. Okay? So, let's have number 1. An artisan bread maker uses 2,000 grams of flour To make 4 loaves of handcrafted bread, how many grams of flour is needed to make 2 loaves of bread? So we have, anong sagot? Okay. So we have direct proportion because as the number of grams of flour increases, the number of loaves of handcrafted bread increases also. Okay? So for number 2, if Mang Gori wants to give 5,000 pesos to his 4 children in the ratio of 1:2:3:4 for their weekend allowance, how much will each of the 4 children receive? So it is a partitive proportion because it is divided into 4 unequal part. Okay? So for number 3, it takes 4 mechanics to repair a car for 6 hours. How long will it take for 7 mechanics to do the repair if they work at the same rate? So we have inverse proportion because as the number of mechanics increases, the lesser the time or the hours. Okay? So for number 4, to finish a certain job in 6 days, 3 workers are needed. If it is required to finish the same job in 2 days advance, how many workers have to work? So it's the same in number 3, so we have inverse proportion. Okay? So for the last number, we have Miss Menor donated 60,000 as a club fund for the upcoming school fair. So the math club, the science club, and the art club will share the amount in the ratio of 2:3:5. How much will each group receive? So as you can see, it is divided to an equal ratio, which is 2:3:5. So it is a partitive proportion. Ayan. So if you get all of them correctly, meaning naintindihan po ang kinds of proportion. Okay? So we're done in our lesson for today about ratio and proportion. So let's answer this activity 3 called Let's Wrap It Up. Okay? Now that you've learned a lot from the very start of our lesson, let's summarize it by filling in the blanks with the correct statement. Okay? So para ma-assess po kung talagang naintindihan from the beginning ng ating lesson to the end. Okay? So let's have number 1. Again, you can pause this video if you want to try to answer, and if you want to know or you can assess yourself if kung naintindihan ba ang lesson. Okay? So let's have number 1. A ratio is blank between 2 numbers or measurements. So the answer is comparison. Okay? So in number 2, in the proportion 3:5 equals 6:10, the means are 5 and 6, and the extremes are 3 and 10. Okay? So for number 3, in direct proportion, if one variable increases, the other variable increases also. Okay? So for number 4, a number is inverse proportionate to another when one variable decreases, the other variable increases. Okay? So kabalik rin siya ni direct. So, in number 5, for the last number, speaking of partitive proportion, we're talking about a whole divided into 2 or more parts. Ayan. So, if you get all of them correctly, meaning naintindihan po ang ating lesson, and I'm so happy for that kasi po, big sabihin, natuto po kayo. Ayan. So, once again, gusto ko po magpasalamat and see you to our next lesson. Thank you uli and happy learning. Bye-bye!